typically in the driving series, I end up driving around. I know you are a lover of cars, and you like a good engine, right?
Yeah, one of my first awesome cars was this car in 2007. It changed from the E55 AMG to E63 AMG, and I got one of the first ones. It was black, and it was definitely one of the sexiest cars I'd ever seen. And it was still wrapped up, and I went to the dealership looking for an AMG, and I got to pull the wrapper off, and I actually drove it off the lot that day. And I had that car for 3 years, which is a long time for me, and it was my first AMG, my first really nice Mercedes. And I have since had a half dozen AMGs, and I have 2 now. And I've been a Mercedes guy most of my adult life now. But my first really cool car was this exact car.
That's really cool.
But it was literally 10 years ago. This model 10 years ago.
Well, this is white with black interior, but it is so fresh and new that we were still programming it on the way here.
Yeah.
So this is now the very updated E63, and I'm thinking that maybe it would be best if you drive it, if you feel up to that.
You won't get any argument from me.
Okay, cool. Well, let's switch spots then,
right.
Daniel.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, in my early 20s, I was doing this weird lifestyle of working 2 jobs for 6 months, saving up as much money as I could, which back then was like $3,000 or $4,000, which was everything I had in the world, and I would go travel. I moved to Mexico, I moved to Europe, I moved to California. I motorcycled across country several times on old shitbox motorcycles.
Is that right?
Yeah, I actually motorcycled to Mexico. I lived in Chiapas for a while because it was cheap, and I was more of an artist back then, so I would work 80, 90 hours a week, literally, for 6 months, and have no life and have no friends, just work and sleep. And then I would go be free for 6 months, or until the money ran out, basically. And sometimes the money ran out in 3 months, sometimes it ran out in 6 months. And I did that pattern for a while. And then I got to be 25, and I really had been doing that for a while. So I had all these great experiences, but I was broke and scared. I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have a skill set that was going to lend itself towards a career, and I was worried that I would be a bartender in my 60s, without a 401k or a pension or any way to retire reasonably. And to me, the money has always represented freedom to travel and freedom to explore the world, and I got really scared at 25 that I wouldn't have that freedom, so I borrowed a bunch of, to me at the time it was a lot of money, $60,000 from about 30 sources. And I went and bought a dive bar in Western Mass in a college town at UMass Amherst, and I turned it into a craft beer bar. And honestly at the time everyone thought I was crazy, because at UMass, especially 2002, it was pitchers for $3 and shots for $1, and I opened up a craft beer bar that was selling $6 pints of beer, which was just insanity back then.
Yeah.
And fortunately, for whatever reason, we crushed it. We were slammed on day one, and that place is still open now 15 years later, and it's done well ever since.
All the way back then when you started that, did you still have the full beard? How long did it take you to grow that?
No, I've had a goatee, I think, some sort of facial hair for most of my adult life. But I just grew the beard, I think, about 2 years ago. It started, and now it's really grown on me, literally. no pun intended. So now it seems part of my identity, and part of, I'm the face of the brewery, the face of the franchise. So it's a very identifiable, and it's a good beard. So I like it, and
it's a solid beard, I'll tell you, and it's all the same color. You never know what's going to happen. A man does not know what's going to happen when he grows out his beard.
Right.
What's it going to come out looking like, right?
I think it changes too from month to month.
So do you have to then wash it regularly?
I just treat it the same way I would treat the top of my head. Unfortunately, I still have all my hair, so that's good. I'm 42. I think I've dodged the bald thing.
It seems like it. Now, is it a requirement if you work for Lord Hobo Brewing Company to have a good long beard? Because I went into your establishment the other day, and there were some good full long beards going on there.
Yeah, I think something about the brewery lifestyle, guys just don't have to really worry about shaving. I think that's part of the draw to working for a brewery is it's a little bit anti-establishment. You don't have to wear a suit, and you kind of call your own life, call your own shots, and you get to choose where you work, and you get to choose the people you work with. So, it's a lot of dirty T-shirts and beat up old jeans because it's a dirty job, and I think guys just feel liberated to be able to grow a beard. And ultimately, when you're surrounded by beards and you don't have one, I think you ultimately get a little bit feel a little left out.
Well, I think about it like when you're a kid growing up, and you think about what am I going to be when I grow up. You don't really know that brewmaster is an option, right? Not when you're little.
No.
So at what point on your journey did that come into your life?
So I was a restaurateur, and still am, and I think I'm weaning myself out of that industry. The restaurant industry is really difficult, but it's not a growth industry. I've opened up 7 places, and they're in New York and Baltimore and Western Mass and Cambridge, and I have a part of a piece in Brussels, Belgium, and I'm sort of just spread out. But the problem is, once your restaurant is full or successful, it's hard to grow. You might grow at 5 or 10% a year, but you can't grow at 50% a year or 100% a year. The brewing industry is 100% a growth industry. We grew 413% last year. We're the fastest growing brewery in the nation, and then we'll hold on to that title until about December 31st, and somebody else will take it over. But we could be in 50 states, we could be in 30 countries, and then we can just go deeper. So there's really no limit to what we can do. We could be $1 billion company in 10 years, and that can never happen in the restaurant industry. So I like the challenge of growth. I like the intellectual stimulation on a day-to-day basis. How do I, and my team, and my growing team, build this company into something that is extraordinary? And that challenge, that really wakes. I get up every morning fired up to go to work, because there's no limit to this. The only limitation we have is in my own head and in my team's head.
Talk a little bit about the history of craft beer and when it really started to become popular and scalable over, the basic beers like your Budweiser.
Yeah, well, it's still only 13% of the volume of domestic beer consumed today. It's about 17% of dollars, so that's a good sign. There's a long way to go for it for actually to become mainstream, but it's grown from 7% to basically 13% in the last 8 or 10 years or so, which is really a doubling. That's quite a bit of an increase over a decade, much to the chagrin of the big guys, of course, because we're just cutting into their market share and their profitability. But it's really been in the last, I'd say, about 10 years. I opened a place 15 years ago, and we were the only craft beer bar within 100 miles that was truly craft. We didn't sell Bud Miller Coors. We didn't even sell Sam Adams because it was too sort of commercial at that point. We wanted to be focused on really small, intimate craft breweries. But again, it took years for even the second place to open up and anywhere around us. And now it's obviously it's a lot more common, but I look at it like it's proliferated the way that Whole Foods has proliferated. When did people start caring about what they're eating, what they were consuming? It's very similar, but where Whole Foods does well, craft beer does well. And if you look at 10 years ago, I don't think there was any Whole Foods in Texas. If there was just a few. But now there's a lot of Whole Foods in Texas, and the craft beer scene, there wasn't a lot of breweries there. Now there's a lot of breweries there. So I think when people started to care about what they consumed and they cared about the value of their dollar, the beer is the most affordable luxury item on earth. There's no, the best beers in the world are $8 or $10. There's no $100 beer, $1 million beer. There's no beer that a Saudi prince can buy that you and I can't buy. So for $14.99, you can go and get a 4-pack of our beer, Boom Sauce, and have a world-class experience for $15 or $4, basically $4 a can. We know whether it's cars or helicopters or yachts or homes or even steaks, there's always some next level of it. But with beer, the value is really incredible. So the difference between a $4 beer and an $8 beer at a bar is astronomically different, but price-wise, it's only $4.
Yeah.
So I love that beer represents this incredible value, and it's an incredible luxury item that people don't necessarily think of in those terms. So we're trying to educate people to think of it in terms of spend the extra $2, and you get rewarded with that experience by spending a few extra dollars. And anybody can put together $15, to go buy a 4-pack.
Yeah.
No matter their position in life, if you want it that bad, you can do it. And you can sort of drink like kings for $15 a 4-pack, and you can't really do that with anything else in life. So I love that about craft. So I think people get a better sense of value. The flavors are rewarding. You don't get the crazy hangover or the bad headaches. They do it. But if you drink,
is that right? That's true. Like it's just
there's no rice in our beer. There's no the quality of ingredients is real, and there's a difference. How do you feel after you eat McDonald's versus going out and getting a Wolfgang Puck burger? You feel better because you put better stuff in your body, and that's the same with. If I drink a Budweiser, I get a headache right away. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know the science behind that part of it. But my guess is that's because it's got shitty ingredients, and it's made with corn and rice, and we don't use corn syrup. We don't use any of that stuff in our beers.
Are you pretty on point with your palate? Like if you taste a certain type of beer, you know what went into making it or where its influences are coming from?
Yes and no. So I have a very good palate. I've been tasting beers thoughtfully for 15 years, like as a career. So I put a lot of effort and energy into tasting and sort of developing the nuance and developing the vocabulary to understand what I'm tasting. And I could pull out certain hops of certain beers, but I sort of stay away from that because it's like every nerd walks up to you and tries your beer and says, "Oh, is that Mosaic?" I say, "No, it's not Mosaic." Or, "Is that Simcoe?" "No, it's not Simcoe." Or, "Is that Citra?" And I'm like, "No Citra in that one either." I try to stay away from that because I think that takes it to sort of an extreme level of nerdism that I don't think is helping anybody out. But I do pride myself on having a really good palate. So, and that's with food, and I drink a lot of Cabernet and coffee. I'm a coffee snob. I'm basically a snob with anything I put in my body. Okay. I want it to be world class. Because why not? Life's too short.
Some of the best growth and learning experience comes from failure. So people from the outside can look and see all your successes, but they don't see everything that came before. What's the biggest lesson you've learned from what could have been perceived as failure along the way?
Well, I say this to friends all the time. It's really just talking to myself out loud. Is sometimes the best deals you ever do are the ones you say no to. Don't be afraid to say no. Just because you like a deal or you want to do a deal. I think a lot of people do projects because they don't know how to say no to it. So I've had to say no to some really compelling projects, especially now, because we have so much momentum and inertia and buzz and excitement, and people want to give us money, and there's a lot of opportunity right now. But it's all about managing my time and doing what's best for the company long term.
Let's talk about like the how, right? Sometimes people go, I have a great idea, I'm just not sure how I'm going to do that. So then they either get stuck at then not knowing the answer, or they just keep plowing forward and figuring it out. Like I would think with what you do for a living, you have equipment, you need bodies, you need to figure out formulas, and you go, okay, if I'm doing this at a small level, I can do it. But then as we grow, you have to invest more, you have to buy more. Did that ever seem overwhelming to you? Obviously, you've been successful at it, so how did you plow through the how?
It's like a big puzzle. That's if you have intellectual curiosity naturally, like it's not hard. It's just a puzzle that needs to be figured out, and you learn on the way. Like I said, I was just me and my dog and a Wi-Fi signal in that big building 3.5 years ago, and now we have 65 people, and we're doing 30,000 barrels this year, and we're crushing it. So I had to hire my first person, and I had to sit down and make an action plan, develop the business plan and raise the money and get the building. And it's sort of like, well, we need the money first and then the building, or the building first and then the money. And then sometimes it was the money after the building, but we had a building, and that was, people were more excited about giving us the money because we had actually brick and mortar at that point. And then you add a third person and a fourth person, and you hire specialists and consultants and people that are excellent at those things that you're not excellent at, and you continue to just build the team. And with the target date of, okay, we have to order this much equipment, and that's going to require this, and we have to get federal approval on that, and we got to get a banking relationship, and we have to get account. It just sort of, all right, and you create this master list of all the things that you have to figure out and solve, and then there's all these other things you haven't even thought about yet that just pop up because you don't have experience. I don't know how to build a brewery, so there were some things that were relatively obvious to us, and then there were things that we didn't think about that one, or those 10 things, and you just kind of have to be able to adapt and move on the fly and hire people that know how to do things that you don't. So it's a really fun project. It's a fun puzzle, to walk in there now and to see, we just added 2 more tanks today. We added 2 tanks like 3 weeks ago. Each one of those tanks does 4,000 barrels of beer a year. It's about $1.2 million of revenue per tank. We just added 4 in the last month. We just added $4.8 million of revenue on the top end, and that's only a small part of what the big, the whole project. So to see that growth and see it come together and see how the place is really evolving almost on a minute-to-minute basis. We're adding people and adding materials and equipment. It's really fascinating puzzle that it's not a fixed, it doesn't fit on the dining room table. It goes over, falls over, and it goes into the living room, and eventually take up the whole house.